Welcome, everyone. I'm Holly Corbett. I'm VP of Content for Consciously Unbiased. We're an organization focused on unlocking the power of your people in the workplace. And we have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Zolana Momani. She's a behavioral scientist and the author of Finding Focus. Dr. Z's work centers on mental health and resilience. She's an advisor and a speaker to Fortune 500 companies and academic institutions such as American Express, Coca-Cola, Estee Lauder, the Bank of America, UCLA, and Big Brothers, Big Sisters, among others. And Dr. Z also regularly appears on Good Morning America, The Today Show, and Access Hollywood. So in her latest book, Finding Focus, Own Your Attention in an Age of Distraction, Dr. Z unpacks why our most valuable resource is our attention. Though it might not always feel like it, we are in control of our brains. And we have more control over what happens in our inner world than what's happening in our outer world. So Dr. Z is here today to talk to us about how to take back our attention so we can focus on what matters most. So welcome, Dr. Z.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being on the show. And thank you for writing this book. I think what I love most about it is that it's this scientifically backed map on how to reclaim our focus. And how we spend our days is how we spend our lives.
Totally.
And so I was wondering, what were you seeing with your clients and in your own life that inspired you to write this book?
I think that I really started to see that everyone I worked with, whether it's a super high powered, CEO with so many resources to, graduate students kind of struggling through things and trying to make ends meet, was really fried and run down and burnout. And burnout had become like this tag word that everybody used just to explain being human. And it's really not. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's healthy or normal. And so I started to sort of wanting to peel the layer on like, what is actually at the core of all of this? Why are we so burnt out? Why has this been normalized? And, when I did the work and the research and kind of talking to all sorts of successful folks and not successful folks, at the core of all of it was just our innate inability to sustain attention in a way that regulates our nervous system. I think, focus and attention is sort of just part of being human and an effective human. And when, these bigger companies have utilized it for their own profit margins and sort of taken it from us, we feel very depleted, constantly task switching and just exhausted every single day.
Yeah, we're definitely hearing that from a lot of workers, that there's kind of this chronic low level exhaustion that everybody is feeling.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting to tie it back to how this inability to focus. And so I guess, can we start off with the basic like level set? What do you mean when you say focus exactly?
Yeah, when I say the word focus, when I talk about the word focus, I don't necessarily mean just narrowing our attention on a single point with like rigidity. I think that's what people think focus is, but I really, when I refer to it and the broader sense in the book, is that it's about really owning our attention, being able to direct it, protect it, and return when we need to and when it wanders. Focus is really about our ability connected to ourselves and each other and what matters most in the world. It's less about just like doing one thing perfectly and more about having over where you direct yourself and where you spend your time.
So that makes me think a lot about this concept of mindfulness,
Right.
being like fully engaged and present. Is it kind of the same idea? Focus is being fully present.
Um, Sort of, but a lot of people use so many of these terms. I mean, I think mindfulness is a practice and focus is a
Mm,
capacity that the practice builds. So mindfulness teaches us to notice things without judgment, and focus is actually what allows us to stay with whatever we're noticed. So in a way, like mindfulness and meditation and all of those things act as like more of like the gym, and focus is the
Mm.
strength that you build at the gym. Like it's our ability in the moment and to not get hijacked with every ping and distraction and thought and ripple.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that. Okay. So mindfulness is the practice and focus is
Yeah,
the capacity.
right.
Um, so we're living in two different worlds. There's the digital world, and I don't know about you, but I can get an alert on my phone or go onto my phone to like send a message, and all of a sudden I get a social media alert, and I'm sucked on into Instagram, and then an email pops up. It's like the Wild West out there. So we're
Yeah,
living in this like digital world that is really stealing so much of our attention, and also the physical world.
right.
I mean, how is this impacting our relationships both with ourselves and with other people?
Well, it's huge. I mean, we're constantly task switching. I talk about this a lot in the book and a lot just generally right now. We're asking our brain to constantly be in between two different realities that operate on completely different time scales. So I like the physical world moves a bit more slowly. It requires patience and nuance and repair and connection, and the digital world moves at like warp speed. It's like instant gratification, instant feedback, instant escape, instant dopamine, like all of these things. So when you live in both, I honestly feel like that's at the core of so much of our burnout and anxiety, is like our nervous system just kind of gets confused. Like intimacy
Mm,
starts to feel too slow, conflict that's normal and healthy feels impossible. Like attention just becomes really fractured. So we see a lot of miscommunication and relational discomfort because we're rarely like really in any one world, in any one
mm.
space. Yeah.
So you said, you mentioned dopamine, and I think we have, these digital devices that we carry in our pocket. A lot of the platforms we're using are programmed to give us those quick dopamine hits, like a new follower, a new like. It's
Yeah.
just a very quick hit. And you were saying the physical world is a bit slower.
Right.
So it's like slow dopamine or slow
Yeah.
dope. You have to work, it takes more time to get that dopamine hit. So it's so much easier just to kind of distract ourselves and go online. And I think it's easy for us to tune out the physical world and the people that are around us in the present moment to be responding to all of these quick hits.
Yeah.
I think, you said in the book that our inability to focus is not just an individual issue, it's actually a societal epidemic. And can you talk a little bit more about that and what the impact of this is having on like great workplaces, society?
Yeah, I think that's a really very important thing to internalize, because the conditions that erode focus are sort of baked into our environment and we can't really get away from them unless we are very conscious about it. Like we're distracted not because like we're inherently weak or anything, but because like the systems in the world are, like you said, like designed. They're literally intentionally designed to fragment our attention. The economy of clicks, the pressure to always be available, whether it's through work or personal life, like chronic stress is just like the norm. We have so much unresolved grief that so many of us carry that we use, devices to distract ourselves from. So it's not really like, it's really important to understand that this is not a personal failing. It's, to me, it's a public health issue. And our attention has essentially become like collateral damage of all of it.
Mm. And you mentioned grief, and so you also said, I think, that like our brains crave distraction. And can you talk about the connection between us wanting to be distracted and like this and grief?
Yeah, I mean, well, when we think about grief, we think about big grief. Like we normally think about losing a person or like a place or a big relationship, a divorce. But we as human beings encounter what I call like micro grief throughout the day. Like there's expectations that are unmet. There's a boss who might not have talked to you the way you wanted to, and there's like a moment of like, wait, what's happening here? And there's a little bit of grief there. There's friendships that don't show up in the way you expected, and that's all grief. And so we push that away. We don't want to deal with it. So we triple screen, we binge watch Netflix, we like check emails and buy groceries at the same time to escape actually confronting that. And I think that's a big piece of the focus, is that, you know, so much of us wanting or craving distraction is like a pacifier to the discomfort we have to feel as humans. We need to feel in order to confront some of these other feelings that we're all pushing away. And it's really important to work through those feelings so that they don't own us, and that we have more control over how we move through our emotions.
So it's kind of like we're digitally numbing ourselves from any
Totally. Yeah.
uncomfortable feelings. And
Yeah.
I mean, what's the cost of not feeling those feelings and just distracting ourselves? Why do we need
And
to feel the grief in order to move through it? I guess I'm asking.
I think that's, I mean, we have to feel, we have to feel our feelings, because when we don't, they become bigger, essentially, and like from like a neuropsychology sense. When we push things away, eventually they surface. Um, it's like, you know, we can't really bury things for long periods of time. Inevitably, they sort of filter through other things. We might snap at our child a little more, or we might be lower patience with a friend. We might, you know, just react to ourselves and have less grace and compassion for ourselves. And that's usually not just us. It's unresolved emotion, you know, stuff that we're not confronting. And so it's really important to do that in order to move through things.
So burying
Yeah.
our emotions does not get
Not
rid of
get
them.
rid of
They
them.
just come
They just
out
come out.
in different unhealthy ways.
That's right. And that doesn't
Uh,
mean like you have to overindulge emotion either. I think we also kind of straddle this
mhm,
weird, like, you know, oh, we have to talk through everything and everything is a thing. It's not. But you know, I think we have to be really conscious of our coping mechanisms and what deserves our attention and what doesn't. And sometimes
mhm,
just like confronting a little thing that could eventually become a really big thing um,
mm,
is worth it. You know?
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And, you also said, that, focus isn't about having more willpower, but having more coherence, and that's such an interesting concept. What do you mean by having more coherence? What does that look like?
Well, I think willpower, like it's become kind of a buzzword, and I think it's really unreliable, because it's like it's easily depleted. Like willpower is hard to maintain, and it's really short term. And I think coherence is when your mind and your body and your environment are essentially aligned, and when your nervous system isn't fighting itself. So coherence looks like, you know, clear boundaries, regulated breathing, habits, like micro habits that reduce the internal noise, creating environments for yourself that support your attention instead of deplete it, and I think not like avoiding our emotions. I think that's coherence. And so when you're coherent, focus is essentially a byproduct of what you've created and not really a battle anymore.
And what are some of the micro habits to help us get more coherence?
Well, I think, you know, I talk about a lot of strategies in the book. I think we have to be really careful. I don't think devices are the whole issue. I don't think social media is the whole issue, but I think, of course, there's a big role that they play in our distractibility. I think we need to really be conscious of our attention sanctuaries and create specific places and windows of time, like literally map it out in your calendar where your phone or your device just doesn't enter into the equation. I think like bedrooms, morning and night routines, certain conversations, like those are just, you know, dining areas, like that's just places where devices should not ever have a place. Um, and then using, you know, little things like micro habits, like I call it a two-step open, like really pause before tapping an app and ask yourself, like, why am I going here? What do I want? Because often it's just to distract ourselves. It's like this two-second interruption sort of interrupts the autopilot that we usually operate off of. And then I think you need to schedule in your scrolling too. Like actually build it into your calendar where you're allowed to numb out and just kind of enjoy it. But that way you're in control of it and it doesn't own you. So I think those kinds of things are really, really important.
Yeah, that's great advice, scheduling scroll time. We're just in this whole new era, right? Like this did not exist 20 years ago. Social
Mhm.
media was just starting, now we're in the age of AI. Um, I think a lot of it for me is like decision fatigue. Like, should I answer this now? Do I need to read this news alert that just popped up? It's like you're constantly making all of these micro decisions all day long that before we had these devices, we didn't have to make so many tiny decisions in the moment about where to focus
Yeah.
our attention. And I guess when it comes to the workplace, like how any advice on how to create more boundaries or micro habits about how to manage messaging in the workplace, because back in the day we went home and work was over, we had no way of being connected to everybody, and now we do. So how do you balance the need to be responsive with also the need to create containers around your time, your focus, your attention?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think the first thing before even like starting with habit building and kind of parameters and boundaries is to understand that like most of the urgency that we feel to respond to people is actually just an internal narrative that we've created and
Mhm.
that our culture supports, and that isn't actually accurate. Other people's emergencies does not equal ours. And so I think that's just something that is very contagious. And when people are, needy and are used to constantly getting immediate feedback, like that's kind of what they want and expect. But it's up to us to train people that that's just not going to support our best work. It's not going to support the relationships, and it's just not how we function. And so, and that, and I work with all sorts of executives and corporate teams, and like heard so many excuses, and it's like, oh no, my boss needs it immediately. Way I'll lose my job. You won't. You just have to have the tough conversations about bandwidth and responsiveness. And often now, because of this world that we live in, like we actually have to on the table, like, hey, when you Slack me, like what is your for responsiveness? Like, how can we work through this so I can integrate to my work so that I'm doing my best work and I'm single tasking and not multitasking, which erodes my focus. And I guarantee you, your boss will love hearing that, right? And so they'll like, whoa, focus, productivity, like this is optimizing your time. So let's actually like, and figure out a strategy. So I think that's the first step. I think that we have to normalize like windows of recovery, because teams the office space normally don't burn out because they're working really hard. They burn out because they're task switching and multitasking and have 14 tabs open at the same time and are can't do multiple things at once. So they burn out because they're just always doing things. And I think we need to really work hard on reducing sort of the cognitive noise. We have to have really clear priorities in the workplace, fewer competing tasks at the same time, and realistic timelines. So I think that's really important. I think that there's tons of things that I do, and I like that I encourage teams to do. I think that we have to have really clear questions for ourselves and our teams in a corporate environment. Like when you start your day, like what are the things like take a 5-minute block to really map out your day. What's important, urgent, what do I really need to get to? What are some of the things that would make today feel particularly meaningful or productive or whatever it is? Set boundaries around checking email. So maybe it's like a time boundary, like at the top of each hour, we check email versus constantly checking email, right? I think
Mhm.
that's a really big thing. I think it's really important that we close the loop. So when we're done with certain things, it's like almost like I'm done ritual, like a way to close kind of that for either that project or that moment or the end of the day to prevent like mental carryover, because I think
Mm.
so many of us like are thinking about that thing while still doing something else and da da da. I think the biggest, easiest thing to do is to have like a one screen rule. So no multitasking across tabs during important work. If you have your computer on, your phone is in a drawer. It's not even on the table. It's like away, right? And your iPad or whatever else you use gone. I know so many people that like put up the iPad, put up the other screen, and then the other screen's in the middle, and there's like 5 screens on the table, and there's absolutely no way to function in that in that.
I mean, you're talking to me. I have like 50 tabs open. So.
Yeah. Well, and like it's not even the tabs, it's like the multiple screens too. I mean, and that's like a whole other big conversation is like the multitasking piece makes us feel like we're being productive, but we just can't.
Mhm.
Every time we switch over, it takes us about 23 minutes, 23 to 25 minutes, not seconds, to cognitively like move to the next thing. So we're actually losing hours and hours and hours every single day when we try to do so many things at once.
Well, that would make sense why so many of us are experiencing this low level exhaustion if we are constantly switching between screens and tasks and it takes 23 to 25 minutes to like
It's
regain your, yeah, that is exhausting. And so what I'm hearing from you is that what this requires of us, what this time requires of us is to be very intentional
yeah.
about putting containers
Yeah.
around our digital lives. And then
Mhm.
also for workplaces to really talk about expectations. Like,
Yeah.
I will check email once every hour.
Yeah.
Um, and that's better for my work because I will be more productive if I am not taking 23 minutes to have to refocus because I keep switching tasks.
Totally.
Is
Yeah.
there do you have any advice on like what either employees can do or what leaders can do to kind of help create some parameters and some intention around their digital world so that they can get more focus out of their workforce and therefore more
I mean,
productivity and innovation?
yeah, I mean, that's what I do. With teams, I come into companies and I help. I think every company is really different. And I think every
Hmm.
company hires different demographics and all different types of folks that respond to different things, right? So some companies have like a much younger workforce, or there's like there's multi generational and people there, so there's like a whole language that needs to be learned. Um, so I think it's actually very very specific, and that's why it's hard to just kind of have like these umbrella templates. But I think if
Hmm.
anything, if I were to say anything to like everyone generally leadership wise from a leader perspective can um, I think the number one thing to do is to let your teams and employees know that you're aware, and you're aware that this is an issue, and you are working on models and ways in which you can target this and help them through this, and to like normalize the load and the cognitive noise, and that you're going to reduce it, and you're working at like figuring out a strategy, and also just like foster some emotional safety. Like resilient, healthy, thriving teams and workforces like feel safe to ask for clarity, to share stressors, to talk about like the mistakes they're making, and then regroup and figure out strategies to optimize their work. You know what I mean? So I think
Hmm.
that's really an important, like feeling safe enough to talk through, because it's something that everyone's dealing with, whether they say it or not. And so it's like, it's
Yeah.
really important that they know that multiple leaders are aware and are going to help kind of figure this out.
Mhm. Yeah, and you talk about psychological safety and people who feel like they are safe, they can ask for what they need. Um, Something else, like you say in the book, is the power of saying no. And I'm wondering, any advice for our audience, for all the people pleasers out there, especially. I'm asking for a friend. Any advice on how to say no with grace?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways. You just have to first really know that you're worth the, and you can say things like, "Oh, I really appreciate you thinking of me, but I can't make it tonight." Don't give an
Mhm.
excuse necessarily. You can even just be really honest and say, like, "My is full. I've had, 7 events this week. I just can't put in another thing. I'm so grateful that you thought of me." Or Like I really want to show up in like all the ways I can, and I just wouldn't be able to give it what it deserves right now if I were to do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think, I think that there's a way to say no by and preserve the trust. Like I'm going through a really, really busy season, and my friends know, like, it's just not the time to ask me to engage in a lot of things. And that, it's like they're even the ones saying, like, I'm not even asking you to hang out because I know your plate is so full, but when you come up for air, like, let me know. And I say that a lot these days. Like when I come up for air, I will absolutely see you, but they trust that I will because they, I do circle back. So I think it's just about like the give and take.
Yeah, yeah. And you made it's a good point that if saying no allows you more time and ability to focus on what matters most to you at that particular time, and it shifts, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
work is the priority, sometimes kids are, sometimes friends are, but it's really about that flow and understanding, like, what do I need to get done right now, what's most important to me, and how do I intentionally put my focus
Right.
there and then come back to my other priorities later. And I love that you said they know I'll come back. So I think that kind of in a workplace too, it creates that kind of trust, right? If
Yeah,
people feel more open asking for things, if they know that you're going to be honest about what you can do, what your capabilities are, what type of bandwidth you have. Um,
exactly.
so that's also important. Um, we talk a lot about emotional intelligence at Consciously Unbiased because some research shows that EQ is more important even to success than IQ. And one of the traits of EQ that we talk about is this idea of resilience. And I know that you've done a lot of work around resilience. Do you think resilience is a key trait of EQ? And do you think the ability to focus is related to resilience?
I think that they're deeply interconnected. I think focus requires a regulated nervous system, but resilience is essentially like the capacity to return to regulation after stress. Because when you're resilient, you're able to be more flexible. You recover faster from like the emotional and cognitive load. So I think like the act of focusing strengthens resilience over time, and they essentially feed each other, if that makes sense.
Yes. And any advice for leaders or managers on how to help their teams be more resilient? Oops. Doc, Dr. Z, I lost you. I can't hear you. So strange. It just tapped out. Um, do you maybe want to? Oh, there. Can you hear us now? Um, it looks like we are having some technical difficulties with the sound, which we've been having today. It's so strange. Um, do you want to jump out and then try to come back in?
Try.
Oh, you're there again.
Oh, does that work? Because sometimes
Yeah.
it's connected through. Okay, great. Weird. Sorry about that.
No, I'm glad you're back. I
No.
I had asked just any advice on how leaders or managers can help their
No.
teams be more resilient.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that. I feel like, right? Like we talked about sort of fostering emotional safety and talking through these things. I think it's really important that we actively, as teams, like reduce cognitive noise and not use 15 different apps to get in touch. I think it's really toxic work environment if you're using like Slack and WhatsApp and this and that. It's just too much. Like Google Doc. I mean, it's just you got to funnel, you got to figure out strategy. And I think we need to build ecosystems and operating systems that really use focus and attention as a core metric of success versus just like a productivity metric, because then you'll just actually increase all of your metrics if you use that as like your core focus.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Um, what are some, I mean, you've given so many small steps or micro progressions, as we call them at Consciously Unbiased, in terms of strategies. And I know it's not just one thing. It's, your book has a 21-day focus plan, which is
Yeah.
amazing. I highly, highly recommend it.
Thank you.
But if you, anything you want to leave with in terms of small action steps that leaders of all levels can take to create more focus in their own lives.
I think that the number one thing we can do is not wake up in our phones. I think we all grab our phones for, and it sort of primes our brain for distraction throughout the day. So I think that's like a really important tool. I think like a little reset, I think, is important. Like just like a 3-minute reset, like take a 1 minute of breathing, 1 minute of intention. What am I going to do over the next hour? Like prioritizing tasks for that time period, I think, is really important. The multitasking needs to be targeted. So maybe, like I said, give yourself like a one screen rule or a one tab. Multitasking is 100% the way to go in life. So,
Hmm.
yeah, are all things that we really need to think about. I think we need to remember that like small shifts have big, big, big dividends.
Hmm. Yeah. Even, I mean, something as what seems like common sense is only keeping one
Yeah.
tab open or putting your phone away. But so many of us
Right.
don't do that. And I think that's really contributing to this feeling
Yeah.
of being drained. I mean, is there anything else that you think is important to ask you that maybe I haven't?
I think, gosh, I think we've talked through a lot. I think focus, I think we need to stop thinking of a lot of this work as like self improvement or self care or whatever it is. And it's more about like self connection. I
Mm,
think that's the piece that's really important to remember, that it's about like being in tune with yourself, that you don't need to become like this whole other person and really like work super, super hard to be focused. You just have to come back to yourself. Focus is a birthright. It's our gateway back to everything that matters about being human. And so I think that's a really important piece of all of this.
yeah, I love that. Focus is our birthright. Where can people go to find out more about you?
I have a amazing community on Instagram, at dr.zelana.
Mhm.
And you can find tons of free resources on my website as well. And I'm starting a membership group where you'll get more of me personally as well. So I encourage people to really dig into that at drzelana.com. And of course, my book has all sorts of content and guidelines for how we can reclaim our attention and rebuild our nervous systems.
Amazing. Well, a good holiday gift. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody who isn't impacted by
Thank
the
you.
focus issue. So thank you for writing it and thank you for being on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you very much.
Have a great day. Bye.
Okay.